Like with most projects, it started by dimensioning the stock. For some reason I didn't record milling it down at the combo machine, but did manage to think of it as I started ripping off one edge. This was recorded back in November, and at that time my ripping blade actually had been damaged. I'm not sure how. One tooth was bent. That's why everything seemed to go a little bit slower and is making a funny noise. I ended up getting that fixed later. The 140 by 45mm boards were ripped in half to make up all the rails. The trundle really is just a glorified rectangle. At 45mm thick, they were a little bit on the thick side and Mum wasn't too happy. The quickest way to deal with taking off 10mm or so was to resaw it at the table saw. The excess material didn't really need to be saved, so the material loss from the extra curve compared to a bandsaw blade wasn't a big deal. Then one end was trimmed square, and I could cut each piece to final length. Unlike a standard bed, trundle beds are pretty slimline. As such, there's no real reason to have any knockdown hardware on them. Dominoing it made a lot of sense, as it made it cheaper than buying any metal hardware. And yes, I could do with some practice on framing the shop. Those offcuts I said that didn't really matter, well, it turns out they did a little. I'll be using them for the slat support, and at 8 or 10mm that they were nowhere near thick enough, and far too wide. After ripping them down, I could glue them together to form a thicker piece. Perhaps not the prettiest, but structurally it's fine. Glue up of the frame was uneventful, but I didn't really think about how much space it would take up with all the clamps. I would have been better off gluing that up outside. I cut out some small corner blocks for somewhere for the casters to screw into. Then the strips for the slat supports could be glued on. And the casters screwed into the corners. Eventually I added 2 more halfway down the frame on either side. There is more to be done to the trundle, but for the time being, that was all I did. Fast forward several months and I got a start on the main bed frame. This time I did remember to record the milling process, starting with breaking down the long lengths at the miter saw first, so they were more manageable at the combo machine. The nice thing about this bed is that all parts come in two. There are 2 headboard legs, 2 footboard legs, 2 cap pieces, one on the footboard, one on the headboard, and 2 long rails. With these wider 140mm boards, that meant every milling operation could be done once and then just rip down the middle. And once again, this bed features bad camera work and dominoes. The bed is going to have panels, but Mum decided that if they were wooden panels, there'd be too much wood in the room, so she wanted a colour contrast. Melamine was chosen as it matched the pre-existing white paint cot in the spare room, and it's very cheap. Getting the fit right took a bit of back and forth. Since the boards weren't going to be the most stable sitting up on their edges, I clamped them between other pieces to give the router as much bearing surface as possible. Eventually I got a nice snug fit. For whatever reason, it took Mum 2 weeks to decide if she wanted a chamfer or not on the inside surfaces. When she eventually decided, I was too annoyed to turn on the camera, so just imagine me chamfering them at the router table. They had to be stop chamfers on the leg pieces where the rails met, so afterwards I came back with a pencil, marked out where it needed to extend to, then used a chisel to notch out the rest. The melamine was a full sheet cut-off camera. The more manageable panels were then cut down to size of the table saw. For the best results, particularly since I don't have a dedicated melamine blade, do a cut from either side of the panel, maybe halfway through. This scoring action leaves very crisp lines. I did the same scoring action when cutting panels to length with the track saw. The chamfered areas would be difficult to get finish onto cleanly without dirtying the melamine, so I decided to apply finish before assembly. I went with Osmo's Polyex Satin, which can be rolled on super easily. 2 coats came out lovely. Then, when it was time to assemble, Mum decided to help. For whatever reason, she thought standing on the other side of the workbench wouldn't be in the way. Then she remembered occasionally I happen to record every project I do in the workshop and managed to spot the 1.5 metre tall tripod hiding in plain sight and eventually backed away. The 2 boards for the side rails were relatively straight, so I opted to just skip plane them. I ended up jointing one edge too so I could rip the other side of the table saw. I really hate doing these long rip cuts. Unlike on the trundle, this will use proper hardware. Like the other 2 beds I've made, I'm going with the Maxi-Lock hardware as they're strong, easy to install and expensive. Well, they're easier to install when the brackets aren't bent like these particular ones were, which took a good couple of hours wondering what I'd done wrong. They were eventually replaced with a new pair from the store and went together flawlessly. Just like on the trundle, I'm using hardwood strips for slat support, and ripping a small offcut was the best choice for this. These were then glued and screwed on. The screws are really just there for clamping pressure as I didn't have enough small clamps on hand. Once that was dried, I could round over the rails using an 1/8 inch round over bit. Then I moved on to the last few spots I couldn't round over before assembling. The beauty of the Poly-X is that those small sections can be easily repaired, unlike polyurethane. The slats for everything were just made from some cheap pine flooring. It's cheap, it's adequate, and it's cheap. I would love to be done with this bed, but unfortunately there's still more work to do. Both parts of the bed, the trundle and the actual bed frame, are usable, so that is good news. The trundle eventually will have essentially a false drawer front on it, so it looks like it's just a drawer that you pull out rather than a bed. Unfortunately, I ran out of material. I don't have anything that is 2.1 metres long, so I can't make that frame to then inset the melamine panels into. So it's most likely at some stage there will be a part 2. However, for now it can be used as a spare bed, which is what the goal was, so I can probably put it off for another 6 months. Thanks for watching.